everybody, welcome to another episode of the Jazz Improvisation series. Today we'll be talking a little bit about swag or style. So, have you ever heard this quote before? It's not what you play, it's how you play it. Well, there's a lot of truth to this, although if you're trying to develop a really high level of playing as a jazz trombonist, what you play is also important. Now, how you play something in terms of your sound, swinging your eighth notes, your time, your articulation, your phrasing, your feeling when you play, inflections, nuances, etc., are a major part of who you are as a jazz trombonist. This aspect of your playing is essentially the amalgamation of all of the music and all of the musicians you've listened to over the years, whether on recording or in person. Live music performances that you've been a part of or have participated in play a huge role in who you are as a musician. So, as a quick example for me, I grew up listening to a good amount of Mexican and Tejano music, and for a number of years, I went to a church that played a lot of gospel music. So, my definition of playing with soul or playing with feeling takes on a different meaning than it does for others who haven't had these experiences. Okay, so for comparison purposes, I'll be using a phrase from a hymn the way I remember it, and it's been about 20 years, so my apologies if you recognize this and it's not accurate, but you get the idea. Now, I'll give you another example of how someone else might play this with soul or with feeling that I wouldn't necessarily play like. And someone else could interpret it this way. Now, I can play a little bit using these specific inflections and nuances, which can actually really come in handy in certain gig settings, but when given a choice, I just personally wouldn't gravitate to this kind of playing. Now, don't forget that you actually have to practice your instrument enough to realize these influences in your playing. So, as another example, I prefer playing my eighth notes a little closer to each other, a little more straighter, still lilt on them, but a little straighter and slightly behind the beat, as opposed to someone who might like a little more space in their eighth notes, maybe closer to shuffle, and also maybe playing in the middle of the beat or in front of the beat, whatever it is. Of course, everything is within context, and this isn't related to the general rule of thumb where the faster you play, the straighter your eighth notes get, or vice versa, the slower you play, the more kind of shuffle like they become. So here's an example of something more medium tempo that I might play. So I'd say most of this came from listening to a lot of jazz early on and really wanting to learn how to play, coming initially from a bebop aesthetic and expanding from there. It started with folks like J.J. Johnson, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, expanding to musicians like Fats Navarro, Carl Fontana, Frank Rosalino, Wynton Marsalis, John Coltrane, Clifford Brown, Tad Del Judas, Brandon Lee. I mean, the list goes on. You can compare it to like reading books and kind of going on tangents from that book, maybe on a similar topic or subject, or from the references of that particular book. It's kind of the same thing. You start listening to certain songs maybe, and you go listen to another version of that song and find a different musician or a different vibe that you like, a different style, or a particular musician, you want to check out the tracks they've been on. So in this case, early on, I'd say it was JJ first, but then, I got a teacher in college who said, check out Bird and Charlie Parker. That's kind of like the roots of bebop, and where a lot of the vocabulary kind of came together. There was a lot of stuff before then that kind of led up to it, and a lot of other stuff that came out of it too. I think early on I wanted to find other musicians that sounded like Bird and had that same feel and swag. Anyway, no matter what your influences are or what swag you gravitate toward, it's all valid. Over the years, I've learned to appreciate other trombonists and how they play more and more, regardless of whether or not I chose to play that way. Related to this, and on a deeper level, you can't really invalidate someone else's playing and, start to call it, less soulful or not refined enough or too clean or too technical, etc. What I advocate is respecting the trajectory someone chooses to go down in terms of playing trombone and developing on the trombone, especially if they've put in a lot of time for that particular playing style. Now, it's kind of funny because at the same time, there are certain elements in these styles of playing which I don't naturally gravitate toward that are found in something that I have been gravitating toward recently, which is early jazz and early jazz trombone playing. Of course, it's like a vast world, but, I'm slowly starting to find my own voice in it. So specifically things like more of the vocal sort of playing or really incorporating the slide in your playing. A lot of that is really present in early jazz trombone playing. So here's a little example of how I might interpret that hymn in this style. And there it is. So as a quick recap, remember to keep your mind open to develop your sound, which is true to your own experiences and what you like. Remember to keep learning and appreciate as much as you can. Now, as a quick side note, whenever possible, try to verbally acknowledge someone if you like or appreciate their sound or their swag or their style. As trombonists and even just as musicians, we often don't get enough of this positive feedback. So it can be really encouraging to hear this from time to time. Now that's it for this video. If you found it useful or interesting, please like it and share it. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to my channel. If you have any questions, comments, requests, etc., leave it down below in the comment section. And until next time, y'all, peace.